Welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are having a great day today. In this video, we're going to be comparing a Squier Classic Vibe versus the Fender flagship, the American Professional. This is a comparison I've never done on the channel, so it should be pretty interesting. Now, when I did my individual review of the Squier Classic Vibe 50s, I asked the question, is this still the best guitar money can buy? And by that, I mean playability, tone, and price. When you put those three metrics together, is the Classic Vibe still the Strat to buy? And at the end of the video, I kind of came to the conclusion that, yeah, I think this is the Strat to buy for most people, unless you're a professional musician and have other needs. But for the average player who just loves playing guitar, when you look at the price, the performance, the playability, and the tone, this is a great guitar. However, when I did that individual demo, I didn't do a comparison, so we really had no metric to compare the tones against. So that's where the American Professional comes in. That's the Fender, flagship guitar. So let's check out the features, the tones, the playability, all that stuff. All right, so let's start with the American Professional Stratocaster. As I mentioned, this is Fender's flagship guitar. So here's a 30-second rundown of this guitar. Now, we've got regular Fender tuning machines. Love to see lockers upgraded on this model from the factory in the future. Hopefully that'll happen. But we do get a bone nut, which is great. On this model, obviously, we've got the rosewood fingerboard, maple neck, skunk stripe on the back, nice translucent finish. This is Sienna Sunburst. Yeah, V-Mod pickups, high-end pots, high-end switch, 2-point trem system with a pop-in, pop-out bar, which is fantastic. And other than that, it's just a very traditional looking Strat. Yeah, so let's take a quick look at the Fender Classic Vibe. Now, on the headstock, we get unbranded, kind of vintage style split head tuners. They seem to work pretty good. Plastic nut on this one, and probably, as you could tell from the camera, the fingerboard and the neck, very high gloss finish on this model. The pickups are Alnico pickups, and I think that's a big reason why this guitar has, the following that it does. Unlike some cheaper Strats and knockoff Strats that often come with ceramic-based pickups, these ones have always come with Alnicos, which really gives it, a good Fender-type tone. So that's great. Pots and switches are very cheap. I've had this guitar apart, dime-sized pots here, pretty cheap switch, but they all work. And as for the trem system, 6 screws, and of course the bar is screw in and screw out. So there you go. That's kind of a quick, 30-second overview of this guitar. Now, just for fun, I did throw both of them on the scale. And in my opinion, the Classic Vibes, the ones I've played over the years, especially amongst the Telecasters, it seems like there's a wide weight variance. So bear that in mind. Take this with a grain of salt. But just in the hand, they felt very similar in weight. So I threw them on the scale. The American Standard came in at 7.6 pounds and the Classic Vibe at 7.5. So ever so slightly lighter on the Classic Vibe. So that's just a really quick rundown. Let's plug these in and listen to some tones, because after all, that's a huge part of this comparison. So let's see if the Classic Vibe can hold its own up against the Fender flagship. So after listening to both guitars back to back, here are my initial impressions. Number one, and a little bit of a surprise to me, was of the two guitars, the Classic Vibe actually had the higher output, the hotter pickups of the two. I don't know why, I just wasn't expecting it. So yeah, a little bit of a surprise, at least to me. Now in terms of like the overall tone comparison between the two guitars, the American Professional had a more balanced tone to me. A little bit lower output pickups, maybe a little bit sweeter sounding, maybe a little bit more complexity or nuance to the tone, lots of overtones and that kind of stuff with the American Professional. The Classic Vibe, as I said, just had a little bit more push to it, a little bit more straight ahead pickups, bright and brash, lots of output. So at least to my ear, that's the main differences between the guitar. The American Standard, yeah, very balanced, lots of Fender-y goodness. The Classic Vibe still has lots of that, but a little brighter, a little hotter, a little bit more punch to the tone for sure. So that's just my initial impressions. Let's talk about the playability on each model. So here are some of the differences I noticed between the guitars when going directly back and forth. Now it should be said I've played extensively on both instruments, but it's not really until you go back like every 30 seconds switching instruments that you really notice, some of the smaller details. Now number one, the nut width on the American Professional is ever so slightly wider than the Classic Vibe. They're very, very close, like extremely close, but I could notice the difference, and personally I do prefer the wider nut width on the American Professional. That being said, both guitars are very playable, and after 5 minutes I'd be completely used to both, but it should be mentioned I did prefer the American Professional from that standpoint. Now in terms of neck profiles, you got the deep C versus like the classic C or whatever, the modern C. Both great. The subtleties are very, very small in my opinion. So switching back and forth, didn't notice that. Fretwork, great on both. The American Professional probably has the harder fretwork that will last longer. The fret wire on these Squiers probably will wear out sooner. But if you're not playing, 4 hours every single day on your guitar, well, they'll last no problem anyway. So that's great. Yeah, we've already talked about the pickups. The weight's the same, the balance, the ergonomics, very similar. A little bit more satin on the back of the neck of the American Professional, a little bit gloss, and again, I prefer the satin. Yeah, and other than that, general tuning stability was better on the American-made guitar. So those were the main differences, just slight differences in nut width, maybe a little bit better tuning stability. We didn't use the trem, but if we started to use the trem, the tuning stability difference would kind of pull ahead. Both of them are decked, so set up with the same string height, all that kind of stuff. And even still, the American guitar held tune a little bit better. But yeah, once you started using the trems, then the difference would really sway in favor of the American-made guitar. So those were the playability differences. Let's talk about, the overall conclusion. So here are my final thoughts between these two guitar models. Now, the question was, can Classic Vibe hang with the Fender flagship? And I think at the end of this video, I can say yes, it does hang with it. There are definitely differences between the two guitars, and I know there are complaints online that Classic Vibe is excessively bright and brash and punchy, and I did find that in this video too. So bear that in mind. If you're gonna pick up a Classic Vibe guitar, which I still heartily recommend, just be aware of that, and you may need to adjust your amp when you're switching from a different guitar to Classic Vibe. They are bright, they are punchy, they are brash, and they have pretty high output pickups. So bear that in mind. You just might need to tweak your pedals or tweak your amp when you pick up the Classic Vibe to play. But other than that, the experience between the two was really, really good. And in some ways, I think I preferred position 4 and position 2 on the Classic Vibe just because of that extra brightness. Because sometimes when you go to those quacky positions, you can lose a lot of the note definition and stuff sometimes. So I did notice that as well when I went from the Fender to the Squier. I'm like, you know what, the Squier on those in-between positions sounds fantastic, really good. But I think on position like 5, the neck pickup, the bridge pickup, the middle pickup on their own, I preferred the Fender. So yeah, there's some differences obviously in between the two models in terms of the quality, the pots, the switches, the tuning machines, that kind of stuff, and obviously the tone. But the experience when you pick one up and play it back to back, well, it's pretty good. So I'll link to both guitars in the video description below. You can check out the full detailed specs there. Other than that, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did and you haven't subscribed yet, well, be sure to do so. We got lots of great guitar related content for you guys. Other than that, have a great week. Take care.